Hello and welcome to the Farming Week, the podcast brought to you by Agriland and AXA, keeping you up to date with all the latest in Irish agriculture. I'm Charles O'Donnell and I'm joined by Aisling O'Brien, Breifne O'Brien and Joe Griffin. Well, this is the first Farming Week podcast of the new year, so on behalf of Agriland Media, I want to wish a happy new year to all our readers, listeners and viewers. Well, if you were hoping for a quiet week to start the year, you'd be disappointed because all things Mercosur have really reached fever pitch in the last week. It feels like there's been an update to this story every hour this week, and Aisling, there was a substantial update this morning, at least from the Irish end of things. So what happened there, Aisling, and how does it tie into the overall picture?
Yeah, that's very true, Charles. The Mercosur deal, it's been dominating the headlines, not just here in Ireland and across Europe, but right across the world, because as we know, this controversial deal, if it does get over the line, would be the biggest that the EU has ever signed. And we know that the Commission was very eager to have the deal approved by member states in December, but the pause was put on that after Italy stated that they wouldn't support the deal until their concerns in relation to farming had been addressed. Now, as you said, this week the ante was very much upped again with news that there's going to be a vote potentially amongst member states' permanent representatives to the EU on Friday. Now, these representatives are appointed by governments in each EU member state, and what we understand is that this meeting taking place tomorrow is being organised by the Cypriot presidency of the EU. Of course, they took over the presidency of the EU on January 1st, and during that meeting the Mercosur deal will be discussed by these representatives from member states, and a vote potentially will be held. Now, there had been some uncertainty in how Ireland was going to cast its vote tomorrow, and understandably there was huge pressure on the government to clarify what it was going to do, because as we know, there is a commitment in the programme for government to reject the Mercosur trade deal, and understandably the independents who are supporting the coalition partners of Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, they wanted to know what way the government was going to go on this, Charles. But today we have confirmation from both the Taoiseach and the Taoiseach that Ireland is going to vote to reject the deal tomorrow. And in a statement, Taoiseach and Fine Gael leader Simon Harris said the government's position on Mercosur has always been clear. We did not support the deal in the form in which it was presented. And he said in recent weeks, Taoiseach Micheál Martin, Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine Martin Hayden, Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade Helen McEntee and himself have been all intensively engaged, working right across the system to secure the best possible outcome for Ireland. But he said that the EU has put forward a number of measures to alleviate the concerns over Mercosur and its impact on Irish agriculture, but that has not been enough to convince the Irish government to vote in favour of the deal tomorrow. Now, Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture and Independent Kerry TD Michael Healy-Rae said today that it was always Ireland's position under the programme for government to reject the deal. It's not new and it's not reactionary. He said the government has been clear and consistent in its opposition to Mercosur in its current form. Now, the European Parliament will be set to vote on the Mercosur trade deal in the coming weeks, Charles, and Minister Healy-Rae has urged Irish MEPs to also oppose the deal. Now, with this confirmation this morning, it's been widely welcomed from farm organisations and various industry groups such as Meat Industry Ireland as well. And I suppose all focus is now shifting to the European Parliament and how that vote might pan out as well.
So we have this vote tomorrow, Aisling, on Friday, as you said. And the understanding is, I think, that the Mercosur deal will pass even with Ireland's no vote. It looks like it will have enough support to get through. But after that, Aisling, do we know what the next steps would be then?
Yeah, so just to talk about that, Charles, the agreement needs a qualified majority of 15 member states voting in favour, who together account for 65% of the European Union's population. Now, Ireland has around 1% of the EU population, so maintaining opposition in countries such as France and Italy and Poland, Hungary and Austria is vital for any sort of a blocking minority to come into force. But what we are hearing is that Italy, we're hearing it from reports and sources, that despite the country's opposition in December, is now looking likely to row in and support the deal tomorrow. So that would essentially make the blocking minority not being able to meet that requirement, that requirement for a population. So it would have to be 35% of the population of the EU. So Italy with around 13% of the population. That's a huge loss to the opposition, so to speak, Charles. So as you said, we are expecting that this vote will be passed tomorrow, and now we will be turning our attention to the MEPs. But there was an extraordinary meeting of EU ministers for agriculture called in Brussels on Wednesday, and that was hosted by the European Commission and the Cypriot presidency of the EU Council as well, represented by the Cypriot Minister for Agriculture as well, Maria Panayotou. Now, the meeting focused on the future of agriculture in the EU, including the Common Agricultural Policy and how that might look beyond 2027. And of course, the Mercosur deal focused very strongly as well, as you would expect. Now, the EU Trade Commissioner Mar Sefcovic told a press conference after the meeting that the Commission had not just listened to the concerns raised about this deal, but had gone further than ever before with unprecedented targeted toolbox, which included safeguards, strong checks and controls. And he said that the agreement alone is expected to increase EU agri-food exports to the region by 50%. But Charles, I suppose the safeguards that the EU Commission have put forward, they're obviously not enough for the Irish government and for a lot of farmers in countries across Europe. We saw this week here at home the confirmation from the Food Safety Authority of Ireland that a quantity of Brazilian beef containing a banned growth promoting hormone had entered the Irish market on December 12th. So that, I suppose, reaffirmed the concerns that we have in this country as well. Now, there has been speculation that if the vote goes the way we expect it to go tomorrow, that Ursula von der Leyen, the European Commission President, could travel to South America and sign this deal if the vote goes the right way tomorrow. And when asked about that timeline during the press conference, Commissioner Sefcovic was remaining tight-lipped, and he said that he doesn't have a crystal ball, and he said he wouldn't speculate about concrete dates. Now, Minister Maria Panayotou from Cyprus said that they are obviously hosting this meeting and that the concerns raised by EU farmers would be discussed on Friday. Have a listen.
Well, as you all know, this will be discussed on Friday at Coreper. Of course, Mercosur is an important trade agreement, but what is also important for us is to make sure that the concerns of the farmers are very well heard. So as Minister of Agriculture and representing the Ministers of Agriculture that were attending the meeting today, we want to make sure that the safeguards that we need to have for our farmers are there. We need to have a safety net for our farmers, and we will wait to see the outcome of the discussions on Friday.
So while all this has been going on, Aisling, we know as well that there's a protest, a major protest set for Athlone on Saturday against the Mercosur trade agreement. It's organised by Independent Ireland. So what are the key details that people should be aware of there in terms of that protest and who's going to be at it and showing up? Yeah,
so we're being told by the organisers of this protest that around 10,000 people are expected to descend on Athlone on Saturday for a major show of force against the EU Mercosur trade deal. And Independent Ireland are hoping to send a very strong message to Brussels and to the European Commission about where Ireland stands on this. Now, the party has welcomed the announcement that Ireland is going to oppose the trade deal tomorrow, but it added that the battle is far from over. Now, we're expecting farm organisations, all the major farm organisations have committed to attending this protest. Marts, breed societies, politicians and groups such as the Irish Road Haulage Association have all pledged their support to turn up. So no doubt there will be a lot of people on foot. There'll be a lot of vehicles taking part. We understand that the protest will take the shape of a vehicle cavalcade through Athlone before concluding with a rally at the Athlone International Arena, which would form part of TUS Midlands, the Technical University of the Shannon Midlands campus, which is formerly the Athlone Institute of Technology. Now, for those attending by car car and who want to walk with the protest, the assembly point is at 11 a.m. at Athlone International Arena in the Technological University of the Shannon, as I said, and that is the main assembly point for people who want to arrive by car and want to walk with the protest. We're being told to let everybody know that you have to arrive early to this. There's going to be a lot of people descending on Athlone to follow all of the directions from the Gardaí and the stewards at all times, to expect delays on all approaches to Athlone, and traffic restrictions will be in place. So please do arrive early. So yeah, look, as I said, Charles, the Independent Ireland Party say that the Mercosur deal has not been voted on yet and nothing is final until MEPs vote in Strasbourg. So they are encouraging people to turn out in great numbers as well. And the party's MEP Ciarán Mullooly today has actually written to Taoiseach Micheál Martin asking him to instruct the Irish ambassador to the EU to seek a 1-month deferral of the discussion at the meeting called by the Cypriot presidency, so that the Dáil and the European Parliament can examine the safeguards put forward by the Commission and changes to the Common Agricultural Policy as well. So we'll see if anything comes out of that. But as things stand, a huge crowd expected in Athlone on Saturday.
Well, that protest is Saturday, Aisling, but the French farmers seem to have beaten us to it. So what's going on out there?
Yeah, of course, huge pressure on the French government as well, Charles, to vote against the Mercosur trade deal. France has been a major opponent as well of the deal in its current form. And as you say, French farmers, they took to the streets of Paris this morning at dawn to highlight a number of concerns, not just, I suppose, Mercosur when it comes to France, but also issues to do with CAP and to do with disease management in that country as well. The protest was organised by a major farming union in the country, and we saw farmers with yellow hats coming from across the region to demonstrate to the French government that they feel let down and they want action to support the industry. So it'll be very interesting to see how France goes tomorrow as well, Charles.
Well, in the midst of all this going on, there were several announcements and statements in recent days from the European Union and some of its representatives on concessions to farmers in a number of areas, including farm payments under the Common Agricultural Policy, the next Common Agricultural Policy post 2027, as well as on fertilizer tariffs. While these have nothing to do with Mercosur on a policy level, there seems to be a general agreement that these concessions were made in an effort to basically sweeten the Mercosur deal for those member states whose support for the deal had been in doubt. So let's look at those concessions, Aisling, starting maybe with the Commission President Ursula von der Leyen's comments on CAP.
Yeah, absolutely, Charles. You're right. A healthy dose of scepticism, I suppose, against the backdrop of these announcements from the European Commission this week. Firstly, as you said, Ursula von der Leyen announced that she was committing to a proposal to make a further €45 billion available in the first year of the EU's next long-term budget for farm payments. And she's proposing to bring forward the availability of some of that money to 2028 for use to support farm payments. Now, she confirmed her plans in a letter to the President of Cyprus and to the President of the European Parliament as well. Now, we have seen that letter, and the President said that while having access to a larger pool of resources in the national and regional partnership plans, farmers will benefit from a ring-fenced amount of €293.7 billion. And she was reiterating those plans that we reported on widely, the CAP proposals that were unveiled in the summer. She now says that to ensure additional resources are available as of 2028 for addressing the needs of farmers in rural communities, she proposes that member states will have access when submitting their plans to up to 2/3 of the amount normally available for the midterm review. She said that represents around €45 billion that can be mobilised immediately to support farmers. Now, notably, Charles, and we've mentioned Italy several times in the podcast, the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni, she welcomed the Commission's letter on social media, and that, I suppose, speaks volumes about maybe how Italy may vote tomorrow.
And on this issue, Aisling, that I mentioned a few moments ago on fertiliser tariffs, what's the detail on that? Because you also have the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, the CBAM, causing a lot of concern, and that's essentially a tax on fertiliser imports from outside the EU. So what's going on there with that?
Yeah, so there's been numerous calls from member states, including Ireland. Minister Martin Hayden has raised this as well at European level on the European Commission to exempt carbon tariffs on imported fertilisers because of the increased costs that it will result in for farmers. So the European Commission announced yesterday that it has brought forward proposed measures in a bid to reduce fertilizer prices for farmers. And I suppose the Commissioner for Trade, Maros Sefcovic, he briefed ministers on the Commission's work to lower fertiliser costs at that extraordinary meeting of agriculture ministers yesterday. And he said that keeping fertilisers affordable is vital for farmers' income and for Europe's food security. And he said that fertiliser costs remain around 60% higher than in 2020, and that's simply not sustainable. Now, he said that the Commission is proposing to temporarily suspend the remaining most favoured nation, or MFN tariffs on ammonia, which stands at 6.5%, and urea, which stands at 5.5%, and where necessary, he said, other fertilisers. And he said robust safeguards will ensure that this relief is well targeted and that the benefits flow directly to farmers. And he said this measure can enter into force swiftly this year. And he said that he expects the measure would broadly offset the costs linked to the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, or CBAM, which came into effect on January 1st. Now, he said the Commission is also going to issue guidance on a new measure proposed back in December, which needs to be approved by the European Parliament and the Council of the European Union, that would allow for a temporary suspension of CBAM on certain goods such as fertilisers. And the time frame for this to be implemented does obviously depend on the so-called co-legislators, the Parliament and the Council, to agree on that as well. So that was the move when it came to fertilisers this week, Charles.
And as well as all that, Aisling, there was also talk of controlling or even banning imports of plant products that were grown with chemicals that are banned in the EU. So what do we need to know about that?
Yeah, so EU Commissioner for Health and Animal Welfare Oliver Valhelli told the press conference yesterday as well that if something is banned in the EU, then it is banned in the EU. But he said when the EU considers phasing out a product, they have to make sure that there are alternatives there for farmers. And these alternatives cannot only be academically present, but they have to be available, effective and affordable by the farmers so that they have a real alternative on the ground. And he was speaking about, I suppose, the European Commission's efforts to speed up how quickly new pesticides come on the market as well. And he also said the system of approving maximum residue levels, or how to regulate reciprocity, has to be revised as well when it comes to pesticides. And he said the Commission is working on a draft regulation lowering all maximum residue levels to technical zero for active substances, 3 particular active substances in pesticides. And he said it followed developments in international standards, and that would ban the import of products containing these residues. And this would be particularly relevant for imports of citrus fruit, mango and papaya as well. Now, he said that they're also going to be stepping up their actions in relation to import controls, and saying that trade agreements are only as good as their enforcement. Obviously speaking to the concerns raised about Mercosur and the products that may arrive into the European Union if that deal is passed. And he said that the EU has already increased external checks by 50% this year. That means more EU vets are going to third countries to check with local compliance with EU standards and rules. And he said they will also increase EU border control points by at least 1/3. And he said when products arrive into the EU, we have to make sure that they fully comply with our rules. And that's why they are reinforcing the 6 most important entry points. And they're also going to start a training programme for 650 national officials to strengthen their skills in this area as well. And there is going to be a task force launched at the end of this month as well about enforcing rules when it comes to imports from third countries as well into the EU. So, Charles, that was the suite of measures announced by the European Commission this week.
Well, moving on from the EU-Mercosur trade deal, but staying in the area of agri-food trade, Bord Bia released its annual export performance and prospects report this week, looking back on Ireland's agri-food performance in our export markets in 2025. The report found that the value of Ireland's food, drink and horticulture exports increased by 12% in 2025 to reach a record €19 billion. For more on this, we're going to bring in Joe Griffin. Joe, you were at the launch of this report for Agriland yesterday, so can you take us through the main details?
Yes, so the value of Ireland's food, drink and horticulture exports grew by 12% in 2025 to reach a record €19 billion, according to Bord Bia's report. These milestone performances were delivered amid one of the most volatile trading environments in recent years, shaped by geopolitical uncertainty, extreme weather events, persistent inflation, and shifting consumer behaviour, according to Board BIA. Despite these pressures, Irish exporters showed strong resilience, with growth largely underpinned by higher prices across key categories, most notably beef and dairy. So meat and livestock exports increased by 18% to just over €5 billion, driven by significant price increases in beef and live exports. Tight supplies of cattle across Ireland and key markets led to a surge in beef prices, but reduced export volumes. Dairy exports rose by 14% to €7.3 billion, supported by improved dairy prices in the first half of the year and a strong grass growing season throughout, which boosted milk production. Export volumes, excluding milk and cream, increased by 12%, with butter and cheese accounting for the majority of value growth, according to the report. Commodity prices across several key export categories declined sharply during the autumn months. Prepared customer foods, or PCF, exports grew by 9% to €3.6 billion, aided by strong performances in chocolate, juices, carbonated drinks and meal solutions, and a 10% increase in exports to the UK. Drinks exports recorded a marginal increase of 2% to €2 billion. Seafood exports rose by 9% to €635 million, as a significant increase in volumes offset weaker returns from many species. Horticulture and cereal exports increased marginally to €330 million, with mushroom exports edging higher while cereal values declined due to lower global prices. So at the launch of the report, Board BIA Chief Executive Jim O'Toole said 2025 can be described as one of the most volatile years our sector has experienced in recent memory. Yet, against this backdrop, the Irish food, drink and horticulture industry reached a record €19 billion in exports, demonstrating its ability to continue building value even in turbulent conditions.
And what was the reaction to these figures, Joe? Because there was good news in some sectors and less good news in others. So what was the response?
So, Charles, Meat Industry Ireland, or MII, has said that there has been 500,000 sheep lost in the market, and added that the EU is vulnerable to imports. So this was also at the launch of Board BIA's Export Performance and Prospects report, and the chair of MII, Philip Carroll, said there are considerations regarding sheep and beef productions. He said the numbers don't tell everything. While the total value of primary beef exports in 2025 is estimated at €3.4 billion, up 24% on 2024, cattle throughput at Irish meat plants is estimated to have decreased by 180,000 head. Carroll said it's based upon value. That's when you look at the numbers and the underlying proposition. So there has been an increase in value, he said, and we've seen why that has happened. Food price inflation has been a dominant feature of that. He added, the underlying thing about the beef sector is that the throughput is down, and that was a surprise for many of us. We could see the trend on that coming over the course of the year. That's one of the challenges. On the future of the industry, he said, the reality for many of us when we're looking to the future about the sustainability of the industry, the question we have to ask is if that's a lost opportunity in adding value to that product here at home, and it is an issue that everyone needs to put their mind to. On the subject of sheep and lambs, he said, again, we have a similar problem to the beef side. We've lost 500,000 sheep, and that has had a significant contribution to the lower results we've had on the sheep industry. So it's a big issue. Just after the event, I had a chance to talk to Jim O'Toole, CEO of Board BIA. Among other things, he said that the report aligns closely with his own view, which is cautious optimism. He also said, I think one thing we've seen in the report is that the degree of optimism has come back from what it was last year, referring to 2025. We've seen positive things happening this past year in terms of perfect grass growing season, which helped with dairy output, for example, and we've seen very strong prices for beef, which is very welcome. On the subject of competition, which was a consistent theme of the day, he said, we're announcing strong results and all competitors are going to ask if they can get a bit of that action. He added, We've also seen how there's pressure on consumers and their ability to spend, so they're weighing up choices and value for money in terms of sustainability, nutrition and convenience. And no conversation this week is complete without the M word. So I asked Mr. O'Toole if he could speak to Mercosur and if we're prepared for whatever eventuality is coming.
It's a good question insofar as, it's a very sensitive subject. It's a very significant threat for beef farmers, and I can understand very well why people are seeing it as such. I think one of the things that we have in our back pocket, if you like, is not only the relationships that we've developed over decades, but the quality of our product. We have systems, we have standards, we have huge number, tens of thousands of farmers that are participating in those standards and meeting them. And that, we have a sustainable offer. And that is what has helped us build our reputation and build our position in marketplaces. That is going to be our greatest defence against some of this potential competition, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that.
That was Jim O'Toole there, CEO of Bordbia, speaking to Agriland's Joe Griffin. We're going to stick with export-related news now and bring in Breifne O'Brien, Agriland's beef specialist, to talk about a new contract for 4,000 live male cattle for export. Breifne, what did we learn this week?
Yeah, that's right, Charles. So we got news this week of a new contract for 4,000 male cattle, and buying has, of course, already commenced for this. These cattle are destined for a market in North Africa, and there's a range of cattle being sought for the contract, primarily all male cattle, but the specifications of the cattle are pretty much Frisian bulls and bullocks from 200 to 500 kilos, continental bulls from 250 to 500 kilos, and Angus and Hereford bulls and bullocks from 250 to 450 kilos. And it's Midland based livestock exporters via Star that are sourcing these cattle. So I suppose, as well as these cattle, they do have a consignment of cattle already bought that are set to depart from the country at some stage this month as well. So look, I suppose it's positive news for farmers with store cattle to sell, and it of course is going to be some assistance to the trade for cattle this spring.
And more broadly, Breifne, can you update us on where we are on factory quotes for the first week of the year?
Yeah, Charles, so I suppose one of the big things from the first full week of this year has been the variation actually in price offerings between factories. So there's up to 25 cents per kilo of a price difference there between outlets at the minute. So it's fairly substantial, Some outlets further south in the country were starting the week offering a base price of €7 a kilo for steers. There was other outlets, I suppose, further north in the country, and they were tabling $7.25 on the grid. Now, the higher rate was for in-spec steers with carcass weights ranging from 300 to 400 kilos in carcass weight. So there was a lot of outlets still only killing cattle 4 days this week, and of course, that reduction in cattle supplies is still hitting home, and this week is no different. And earlier in the week, procurement staff were still anxious for cattle to fill out kill sheets for this week. So I suppose just looking at heifers then, heifers have been quoted at prices ranging from $7.10 to $7.35 per kilo on the grid. A lot of processors are in the middle ground there at $7.20, $7.25, maybe for heifers. Still plenty of appetite from processors there. Cow price offers have been cut this week, with P grade cows being quoted at approximately $6.40, and then the plainer P grade cows at anywhere from $6.20 to $6.30. The O plus grading cows, them stronger type O grading cows have been quoted at $6.60, with the plainer O grading cows at $6.40 to $6.50 a kilo. And then, the better O grade cows are at $6.70 to $6.80, U grade cows at $6.90 up to €7 and above it in cases. Still some variation there in cow price as well. And of course, I suppose just to point out that some of the regular cow suppliers are managing to secure price rates 10 cents per kilo and more above these levels. Just, I suppose, on the under 24 month bulls, it's around $7.40 to $7.30 there for U and O grades respectively, with $7.10 and $6.90 to €7 for them O and P grade bulls. The under 16 month bulls again are in at $7.10 per kilo, approximately, with some more money available in certain cases for them bulls too.
Finally, Breifne, there was good news this week for the beef sector, with another Asian country opening its doors to Irish beef.
Yeah, that's right. Charles, so I suppose, a bit of positive news there for the Irish beef industry, in that the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Martin Hayden, as well as Minister of State for New Markets, Noel Grealish, both jointly announced that Vietnam will begin accepting beef products from Ireland. So the categories of products that can now be exported from Ireland to Vietnam includes beef, minced meat, meat preparations, heart, liver, kidney and cooked beef products. So look, that's some positive news there in that a new market has opened. Vietnam, just some facts on it there. It's the 14th most populated country in the world with over 100 million people, so fairly big population there, and its economy has experienced rapid growth and development in recent years. The opening of the market now in Vietnam brings the number of markets for Irish beef to over 70, and of course, the Irish beef is being enjoyed in markets all over the world, and Vietnam is another country that will be hopefully added to that now this year.
Well, we've had a very beef-themed podcast this week so far, but we will give you one brief dairy update now. Following a poor run of results in recent months, the global dairy trade has recorded a positive start to 2026. The first GDT auction of the new year took place this week, resulting in the price index increasing by 6.3%, which has been welcomed by the ICMSA, which said it was just what the doctor ordered. Finally this week, the Health and Safety Authority has published provisional figures showing that agriculture is once again listed as the most dangerous sector in the country in terms of workplace accidents and fatalities. So Aisling, can you take us through these findings from the HSA?
Yeah, Charles, unfortunately not a positive way to end the podcast this week, but an important message all the same when it comes to farm safety. The provisional figures overall show that 58 people died in work-related incidents in Ireland last year, and that figure represents a 61% increase on the 36 people who died in 2024. Now, as you said, the agriculture sector was again listed as the most dangerous sector in our economy. There was 23 deaths recorded, and the sector continues to account for the highest number of fatalities, representing 40% of all work-related fatalities last year, and that's coming from a sector employing around 4% of the workforce. Now, the construction sector recorded 10 fatalities compared to 5 in the previous year, while there were 5 deaths recorded in the manufacturing sector compared to none in the previous year. And in the coming year, the Health and Safety Authority said it's going to deliver a programme of risk-based, evidence-led workplace health and safety inspections across all sectors of the economy. And it said that those sectors that pose the highest health and safety risks will be targeted with a range of enforcement, compliance and awareness-raising interventions. Now, I did catch up with Minister of State at the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Michael Healy-Rae, who of course has responsibility for farm safety, and he told me that last year was very sad and very life-changing for many families in terms of farm deaths and injuries. And he said he keeps pleading with everybody that there's nobody out there who's perfect, everyone has made mistakes, but we have to improve. And he said he wants to model farm safety in this country on our building sites, and he said building sites in this country were a very dangerous place at one time, but they did make changes, and important changes, and he feels that the farming sector could maybe take some lessons from that. He said that we need to be conscientious about what we do, how we do it, the methods of work, whether it's dealing with animals, whether it's dealing with farm machinery, working at heights, working around the yard, all of those sort of things. And of course, ahead of the busy spring calving season, which is just around the corner, the Minister has stressed, of course, the need for vigilance around freshly calved cows as well in particular. But I suppose just a salutary reminder at the start of this year for us all to approach all of the jobs on farm with safety first in mind.
Yeah, very well said, Aisling. Now that almost brings us to the end of today's podcast, but we just want to bring you some quick final reminders. Firstly, all sheep farmers are obliged to carry out a sheep census annually and submit details to the Department of Agriculture, Food and the Marine. The census had to be carried out on December 31st, and the closing date for submitting the census results by post is January 30th, 2026, while online submissions are possible up to February 14th, 2026. Secondly, the reopening of the slurry spreading season is fast approaching for zones A and B. The restricted period for spreading soiled water lifted on Thursday, January 1st, which means that milk suppliers can begin emptying water tanks when conditions allow. Make sure you check out that article on the Agriland website and app for all the other key dates and details. And finally, students from across the country flocked to the RDS in Dublin this week to showcase their projects at this year's Young Scientist and Technology exhibition. Agriland was at the event, and we have an excellent video on our website and app where you can check out all the farming and food focused projects. But that's where we'll leave it. Please don't forget to rate, review and follow The Farming Week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love if you could spare some time to give us 5 stars and share The Farming Week with anyone you think might be interested. From Aisling, Joe, Breifne and myself, all the best.